Corsair Vengeance RGB DDR4 memory modules feature customizable multicolor lighting and are designed for overclocking with XMP 2.0 support. Give your build a unique look with vibrant RGB LED memory by Corsair. Click the link in the description for more information.
Excellent!
What's up guys, and welcome back to Paul's Hardware. Today's video is going to be my monthly build for April 2017. This is an AMD Ryzen build. It's going to cost you about $1,050, but you can also get it down to $1,000 or even a little bit less by swapping this 1600X CPU and cooler for a 1600 CPU that comes with a built-in cooler, although you might not be able to overclock quite as well. Beyond that, all of the parts have already been chosen and laid out in my monthly builds video at the beginning of every month. Because every month I plan out a build, and then I build the build, and then I come back and test the build and give you guys feedback on the actual build process and performance. So without further ado, let's go over really quickly the parts I'm going to be using today. So let's begin the rundown of our parts with our processor, of course, the Ryzen 5 1600X. So the X is going to be clocked a little bit faster than the Ryzen 5 1600. However, it does not come with a cooler. There's nothing in here besides the CPU itself. It is a 6-core CPU with SMT enabled, so you get 12 threads, which is a very nice sort of in-between between paying a little bit more for the Ryzen 7 series and also getting yourself more cores and more threads versus like a 1400 or 1500X. Now, since it doesn't come with a cooler, we're going to be using the Master Air Pro 4 cooler. And bear in mind here, this is AM4 compatible, but you do need an AM4 bracket. So double check when you're purchasing to make sure that it is actually listed as AM4 compatible. If not, you can hit up Cooler Master and they will send you the AM4 bracket to mount this. And they'll do that free of charge if you've purchased it without that. For motherboard, we have the Asus Prime B350 Plus, and I really like this motherboard because it's very inexpensive, reasonably so. It's only about $100. You got your AM4 socket, 4 DIMM slots, you got like M.2 support in a good area right up here, and it's basically going to let you plug in and connect everything that you need. It's got Asus build quality, and you know that they do a really good job with their boards. Even looks pretty cool with the black and red color scheme and a little bit of LED highlighting going down the side, so I think that's going to do a fine job for us. The shortcomings of the X series chipset, the X370, is mainly just the lack of two-way SLI support, but honestly for this build we're probably not going to need that anyway. Although we do have an NVIDIA graphics card, the GeForce GTX 1070, and I'm kind of comparing this build to the one that I did about 5 or 6 months ago, which was a $1,200 build. This one's about $200 less, and yet it still has a GTX 1070. I'm going with the MSI one here. You can pick your flavor depending on what color scheme you like or which one you can find on sale. But this is the Gaming X version from MSI, and I already know it's got a nice cooler on it, and again, sticking with the black and red color scheme. Speaking of black and red color scheme, another sort of optional item here is going to be your SSD. I mean, not optional, but you can sort of choose which one you like best and which one suits your build. This is the SanDisk Ultra 2, which you can get in 240 gig capacity. This happens to be a 1 terabyte one, but it'll look just the same, and it'll do just the same job as before. But find yourself an SSD. That's one of my main requirements for computer builds these days. Makes everything faster. For memory, we have a Corsair Vengeance LPX kit. This kit has been used many times before. It's very popular, but it is DDR4 3000 rated, which means we should be able to hit 2933 without any problem with our 1600X here. And you are going to get a nice boost in performance by going with a bit faster memory, such as 2933, over going with the base speeds of like 2100 or 2400 or something like that. And of course, if you do decide in the future that you want to upgrade to even faster memory than this, well, a memory upgrade is a very simple thing to do. For the case, I went with the NZXT S340. This is just a very solid case. This isn't the Elite Edition or anything. It doesn't have tempered glass, but it comes in at a very reasonable price, only about 60 or 70 bucks, again, depending where you buy it, and shipping and all that kind of stuff. But a very solid case, really cool design, looks nice. I built in it before, so it shouldn't give us any troubles. Finally, for the power supply, I did have an EVGA power supply listed. I'm going to be using this Cooler Master V650 instead. It's basically just what I have on hand right now. I don't have the EVGA power supply that I listed on hand. This is going to kind of get the job done in the same way. It's still got all black cabling, but again, depending on what you can find in pricing, you might want to stick with that EVGA model. Just you know, double check or do some reality checking and make sure you got the prices lined up. So there are the parts, and now it is time. Let's get this thing put together. Cue the music. board all set up. Installation of this CPU cooler is not terribly difficult, especially if you've ever installed a Hyper 212 before, because it's really about the same installation method for the Master Air Pro 4. You do have to remove a couple of those AM4, the top retention brackets that come pre-installed on the motherboard. You just pop those off, and then you use the existing AM4 backplate that's already on there. There's just 4 of these little nuts that you put on top of that to hold the bracket in place, and then you mount the CPU cooler on top, of course, after putting a little bit of thermal paste on there to provide a nice thermal interface between the cooler and the actual CPU itself. Beyond that, just popped in the memory, and then you might notice that this motherboard is not quite as wide as typical ATX motherboards. It's kind of the, this way. It's a little bit narrow that way, so rather than the 9 mounting points that we would usually have for a motherboard, we actually have 6, 2 on the top, 2 in the middle, and 2 at the bottom. So next up is to make sure that the case is prepped for that with the standoffs in the right place, and then we'll get everything dropped in there, and then of course we'll move on to the power supply, getting that installed and getting all the power hooked up. Now I've got the motherboard installed now, and I've actually come across a very interesting issue, perhaps something that you might not encounter in a lot of builds, but I already mentioned the size of this motherboard being a little bit shorter than you would typically have for an ATX motherboard, and actually, since the case has standoffs pre-installed, you might notice them kind of sticking out at the edge of the board, these other 3 on the side, so there and there, as well as one in the dark, which is up here in the corner. Now, I was tempted at first to leave those as is, but honestly it's never ever a good thing. This is just best practices for building a computer. Never a good thing to have a motherboard installed where you don't actually have a proper mounting point where the standoff should be, like it is over here with the screw that's installed. So I am going to pull the motherboard out and get rid of these extra 3 standoffs. Quick shout out here to NZXT for actually putting all of the screws into individually baggies that are labeled, like these are UNC632, these are M3, these are standoffs, and if you're wondering how to get the standoff out of the case, another nice thing that NZXT has included is an actual standoff nut right there, so you can use Phillips head on one side, and on the other side it's just a little hex. If you have a standard little hex kit, you should be able to use this. You should be able to use that as well, but this should work just fine. Alright guys, the build is pretty much done at this point, and before I get to, before I put the side panels back on and do some final closing sexy shots, I wanted to give it a little once over and a few notes on the actual build process. Everything went pretty smoothly, and as you could probably tell, the 3 extra standoffs I had to remove was probably the most confusing part, I guess, but color scheme wise everything blends in great. We got a nice black and red theme for the motherboard, the case, the graphics card, even the SSD down there in the bottom, looking pretty good. Cable management was also very easy in this case. I like the raised cable management bar that they have in the NZXT S340s. You can hide stuff back there and it makes it easy to tuck stuff back and away. I did this time opt to reconfigure the fan situation that they have going on. I think when they shipped this case, they set it up so that you can easily install like a water cooler here in the front. So they put an exhaust at the back and an exhaust at the top. I removed the top exhaust and just moved it up here to the front to equalize the airflow a little bit more. So you got an intake pushing some air in this way, and then of course fans are going to push stuff through, and then the exhaust there at the back. Then some air can leak out the top too if it wants to. This dust filter also will get a little bit more use in that case, and hopefully keep the case from being too much too much negative pressure. Moving around to the back for cable management, as you can see, cables are managed. I did tie a few of the extra loops that came out from the top back here just so that they wouldn't stick out as much. Like I got a zip tie there and a zip tie there, just holding the extra loops of fan cables in place. Took the CPU fan, or CPU power, and brought it down here along the side. Everything else as far as extra cables was just pretty much shoved back there into the basement. And then I really did minimal cable management here. I mean, I put a zip tie there to kind of hold the bulk of these cables together in place once they're where they're supposed to be. And everything else is just a matter of kind of routing it where it should, and getting the excess tucked out of the way. So there it is. So I am now going to put the side panels and front panel back on and fire this up. I will get Windows loading very soon so I can do the follow-up video with some testing of the system to show some performance as well as some temperatures and noise. And I'm going to leave you guys with some sexy finished shots of this build. I think it looks pretty much equivalent to the one that I did about 6 months ago. Still looks very sexy and is still very reasonably priced for a system that is this powerful with the 6-core 1600X as well as a GTX 1070 in there. But guys, thank you so much for watching this video. Really hope you enjoyed it. I'll be back with more videos very soon. So hit the thumbs up button and subscribe to my channel if you want to see more videos. And check out the description for links to all the parts that I've used in this build, with big thanks, of course, to the vendors who have provided parts for me to build with, including NZXT, Cooler Master, Asus, Corsair, and MSI. Thanks a lot for watching again, guys, and we'll see you next time.